Assalamu alaikum and very warm welcome to all of you. As you know, our topic today is in search of peace and security in the neighbors. It's one of the easiest and the most difficult topic because the regions that have peace and security, they prosper. After the Second World War, we know France and Germany decided to bury the hatchet and look how prosperous they are. But the story of subcontinent is very different. We had 4 wars, and apart from these wars, on the eastern front, eastern borders, on the western side, last 40 years, it's terrible condition. The outcome of the Afghan wars and the invasion of Russia, Soviet Union at the time, and later on, you call it first Afghan war, second Afghan war, whatever it is, and then the takeover of Taliban. The menace and the consequence of those spill over on Pakistan. Till today, Pakistan has not recovered. We are seeing suicide bombings, we are seeing terror attacks. On the contrary, India, with which we had so many wars, I think all of you agree that since last skirmishes or the Balakot incident, the border is calm. Then we have the Chinese border, a friendly relation with China, and we have wonderful relations, we call it. In fact, only a couple of months ago, the Chinese foreign minister said, friendship of gold. But of course, there are some problems. Then we have Iran. We have different borders, but the region individually and collectively is not prospering as it should. Why not? We'll speak to a guest, and the guest tonight is a wonderful panel, Michael Kugelman. All of you must be familiar with him. He's the director of the Wilson Center South Asia Institute. He was previously Asia's Program Deputy Director and Senior Associate for South Asia at the Wilson Center. He's also a weekly columnist for foreign policy and writes in South Asia Brief newsletter. We also have with us Zahid Hussain Saab. Zahid Hussain Saab is a very well-known journalist, and I think we read his column very frequently. And sitting next to him is General Athar Abbas. As a DG ISPR, we knew him. We used to see him so often on television. And right now, he's here as an analyst, and we'll be talking to him. He has a long introduction with me, but I think we all know General Athar Abbas, so I can find it to the. Michael, coming back to the situation, South Asia region prospers, right? But at the moment, what is the scenario in South Asia? What is the scenario in Asia, Central Asia, Southeast Asia? And what are the new developments that you think can bring some sort of peace? As I mentioned, India-Pakistan border is quiet. Is there any hope of peace and stability here?
Okay, sorry about that. It's great to be here, especially with this great group of panelists. I guess I could start with the good news as I see it, and I mentioned this earlier. This is, of course, a region that's experienced in its past internal wars, regional wars, and international wars, looking at South Asia on a whole. And I would argue that on some levels, the region is more peaceful and is seeing more stability now than it has in previous decades, in the sense that, these internal wars that had played out in Nepal and Sri Lanka for so many years are done with. Finally, after 40 years of war in Afghanistan, that's done with. And, we're seeing relative stability in the region, but indeed, more broadly, some of the issues that you discussed, terrorism and so on, that still is a problem. Very briefly, what I see as the big storylines in South Asia from a peace and stability perspective, one is that there are so many tense borders, right? We have India-China. We have Afghanistan and Pakistan. We have Bangladesh and Myanmar, which is easy to forget about. And the interesting thing is that India-Pakistan, there's always going to be tensions along the LOC. But given the fact that there's been a new truce in place for nearly 2 years, the LOC has been relatively quiet over the last few years. So ironically, that's a space that's perhaps one of the more quiet areas in the region for now. Second point, second big storyline I see playing out across the region is the intensification of great power competition. We're seeing India-China competition really heat up, fueled by BRI and CPEC and so on. We are also seeing U.S.-China competition now play out increasingly in South Asia as the U.S. scales up its engagement in efforts throughout the region to try to drive countries around the region away from reliance on China commercially. And we're quite frankly starting to see the U.S.-Russia rivalry play out in the region, as is visible from a recent incident in Bangladesh, where Bangladesh did not let a Russian ship port, which was bearing parts for a Russia-sponsored nuclear power plant in Bangladesh. Bangladesh, under pressure from the U.S., sent that ship away. So I think that's another key storyline to look at when we're talking about broader stability considerations.
But do you see any improvement in economic relations with India, any activity with India-Pakistan?
No, I don't, and this is a shame. I think that certainly both countries, and certainly Pakistan, could benefit from greater economic relations. But as you all know, in recent months, particularly since the floods here, Pakistan had considered the idea, I think, as I understand it, of trying to push for reopening some border trade with India so that it could be in a position to import some foodstuffs, but nothing came of it. And I don't think India, given the political environment there, I don't think there's any interest whatsoever in extending a hand to Pakistan, even if that entails resuming some limited border trade. And I think we could all understand the reasons why.
Zahid, for Pakistan, the growing role of India in the region, does it possess concerns keeping in view its hegemonic design? Because at the moment, United States and India, we know, have come very close.
Well, how I describe the present state of India-Pakistan relations is that there is no peace, no war. And that is basically the situation at the moment. We may actually, there is no danger of the two countries going to war at this point. The tension on line of control may have eased, but whether we can call it a kind of eerie situation. But this is, at the moment, actually, I don't see any development in India and Pakistan relations. This is not the first time that the two countries have demoted their diplomatic relations, and at this point of time, there is no talk on any issue. I think probably this is the first time, even actually during when the situation was very hostile between the two countries, we always have diplomatic relations, but now actually there is no diplomatic presence as such. So, and also because of the visa restriction, there's no actually interaction on the public people level. As far as the trade is concerned, I think probably, yes, actually there's no trade going on because there's no talk between them. There's no diplomatic relations between the two countries. And I think probably there has been some movement occasionally, and particularly some initiative was taken from Pakistan, but also actually the two countries have become prisoner to their own public opinion. And that's, I think, biggest factor when we talk about Pakistan. I must say that until a few years ago, the lobby for peace with India was much stronger here. And also almost all the political parties across the board, from right to left, there was actually a kind of desire, or they were all in favor of some kind of peaceful relations with India and also opening trade. But I think the turning point was Balakot attack, and that actually has turned the public opinion in Pakistan has changed completely. I'm not saying that there is the same kind of hostility if you see what you see in India, but certainly the mood in Pakistan has also changed. As far as India is concerned, huge actually, like entire politics of BJP, based on to some extent on anti-Pakistan rhetoric, and I think probably that has been one of the major impediments. And certainly, actually, whenever there was some movement, something happens, like we have seen actually Pathankot incident, Pulwama incident, Balakot incident, all those things are happening. So I don't think, I don't see any movement as far as the relations between the two countries. And I think, yes, this kind of, but I don't see any kind of aggression or any kind of, war between the two countries. There's no, I think, it seems. But the major problem when we're talking about geopolitics, Pakistan's major problem at this point of time is western border. If you see actually what is happening on our western border, it's much more of a serious concern for Pakistan than even now with India. And I think probably the euphoria which we have witnessed among certain quarters in Pakistan at the return of Taliban, I think now there is a lesson for them too. What's happening now in Pakistan marks a greater danger and security threat to the country than even actually at this point of eastern border. And sorry,
Just wanted to raise a point. Do you see India-Pakistan relations tension till 2024, the Indian elections, or you think beyond that?
well, I was part of track 2, and it has been going on for quite some time. I was there actually at a meeting between delegates of the two countries in Bangkok in February. So my impression from the Indian delegates, and the conference was attended by a very senior BJP leader. So what they are actually saying that the 24 election, and they are very confident about Modi returning yet another for yet another term. And according to him, he could take some initiative, because after that, Modi would be, I mean, like he knows actually that he could not stay in power forever. So there is a feeling, I think probably there's a kind of discussion going on, that he would like to leave a legacy. And what legacy actually better than for him actually to have some kind of, improvement of relation with Pakistan. But I think it may not be so easy. But so much has been done actually. I think probably what we have witnessed earlier, like for example 2004 to 2008, when this track 2 peace process started, that was a different situation altogether. We cannot actually go back to that situation. So some of the initiative, even actually in the best of intention, I mean, it also happens in certain environment. And at this point of time, I don't see any improvement in the environment.
Okay. General Athar, after the takeover of Afghanistan by Taliban, there was optimism. Pakistan thought we'll have better relations, strategic depth, or whatever you wanted to call in the military terms. But what went wrong, and how do you see Pakistan-Afghanistan relationship in the coming years?
You see, there were external factors and internal factors both, which affected the security environment of our country, and of course Afghanistan is one. There were factors which we had some control over, and there were factors which we never had any control. But the decisions were ours, and those at the helms of affairs, those who took decisions today, they are really haunting. And one of them is, of course, in the relation with our relationship with Afghanistan, the decision to support and go overboard in providing all kind of sanctuaries, material and financial support to the groups who were operating in Afghanistan, disregarding the fact that they are twin brothers. I mean, in the past we had learned, I wish we had learned the lesson in the past, that all those who had taken refuge in Afghanistan, criminals like Punjabi Talibans and other TTP elements, the previous Taliban regime had refused to hand them over to Pakistan government. I mean, this was an eye-opener, should have been an eye-opener. But disregarding that, we continued with the policy on the objective that probably we wanted America out of Afghanistan, and therefore this was one push that would enable Pakistan to clear Afghanistan from NATO and ISAF. So this policy, in my judgment, in my opinion, is now having a boomerang effect, and all those groups who had migrated to Afghanistan and somehow, to my utter astonishment, that the government decided and the security establishment also decided to negotiate the resettlement with those groups. And unfortunately, all those higher ups, the authorities which the TTP was not expecting that will be between them, they had gone there and negotiated the resettlement with them. And then they dictated their own terms, and what we see now is a spillover or after effect of all that resettlement. So this was the case. I think your question was about.
Why do you think this was the thought among the circles, especially the military circles, that this should be the strategy? Obviously, you're going to put, some of them are putting blame on Imran Khan, but obviously Afghanistan is such a situation where you can't do anything without the establishment.
You are referring to the resettlement strategy or support? Resettlement.
Yeah.
All right. Resettlement, basically the understanding was that at the level of middle level leadership, it will be negotiated with those groups who had gone across, and they would ask to come back in numbers and will resettle. But when they found the higher ups, like the highest intelligence authority, the highest diplomats, dealing with those groups, small groups, many groups, so then they started dictating their own terms, that they will not only come with their families, they will come with their equipment, they will come with arms and ammunition, they will have a logistic train also, etc., etc. And when they were allowed to do that, then after resettling here, then they started their own business, the old business. So this is where I think the folly was.
Michael, Taliban government support TTP, we know that. And in United States at the moment is not in between, because United States has gone back and Pakistan is the key at the moment to handle it. But Pakistan itself has not been able to handle this situation. Do you think United States, if it's dealing with the Kabul independently and via India, that is a better strategy, or will be something disaster?
Thanks. Yeah, it's an interesting question. The U.S. government, of course, its policy in Afghanistan has become much simpler and more narrowly focused since it left Afghanistan. So it's not really up to much vis-a-vis Afghanistan. And I think that its main objectives with Afghanistan now are to engage with the Taliban to the extent that it can and wants to, in order to talk about issues like ensuring humanitarian assistance can get to where it needs to get without the Taliban getting in the way. And the other big priority for the U.S. in Afghanistan now, I think, is really the social policies of the Taliban. You know, all the horrible things that they've been doing, the bans on women and so on. So when it comes to the issue of terrorism, it's very interesting because, indeed, I would argue that there's a lot more convergence now between the U.S. and Pakistan on terrorism issues than there had been when the U.S. was fighting a war in Afghanistan, for obvious reasons. The U.S. is no longer there fighting a war, so Pakistan's past positions, its past embrace of the Haqqani network, it doesn't matter to the U.S. anymore. At this point, the big terror threats in the Afghanistan-Pakistan region are perceived equally by the U.S. and Pakistan. Certainly the ISK threat, which I think we tend to overlook to our peril. And the TTP threat as well. I mean, it's been very noticeable that, periodically, or even frequently in recent months, when there's been a TTP attack here, including this terrible, most recent attack just the other day, there's been condemnations from the U.S. government, from the U.S. State Department. So I think the question is, how does the U.S. want to deal with that in the broader context of its policy in Afghanistan. I don't think the U.S. is going to come to the table in its meetings with Taliban leaders in Qatar in the coming weeks and months with the TP issue on its agenda. That would be good. I don't think that's going to be a priority. But I think the area to look here is on the issue of the U.S.-Pakistan relationship. There's been some movement on the counterterrorism front. As you know, a senior military delegation from Pakistan was in Washington for this defense dialogue. No one really knows what they discussed, but the fact that they're talking about these issues, I think, is important. But I think the Taliban are not going to listen to anyone at the end of the day. I think that's an important point to point out here. When it comes to the Taliban's relationship with the TTP, it doesn't matter who's trying to pressure the Taliban to do something about that, whether it's Pakistan or the US or China, which I should say is also very concerned about the Taliban's position toward the TTP. Taliban is not going to listen to anyone, and that's in particularly because the supreme leadership based in Kandahar doesn't really care about getting international financial assistance or formal recognition. And even though you have leaders in Kabul that take a bit of a different position, it's the Taliban supreme leadership in Kandahar that calls the shots, and they don't care, and they certainly have no interest in reducing or ties with the TTP or expelling them from Afghanistan. So it'll take, I think, a lot of creative thinking in terms of how to get to this issue.
Thanks. Zahid, my question is, what challenges can it bring to the region? The disturbance between Pakistan and Kabul government, and Kabul government support to Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. What are the challenges that we are likely to face in the near future?
Sorry. Anymore? Hello? Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think the end of American war in Afghanistan has changed the regional politics in a drastic way. And the Taliban's return to power was already predicted. It's not, I think it may not have come as a surprise. But what has come to us as a surprise was the very collapse of Afghan forces, and so soon. So nobody actually expected that the whole Taliban would be able to take over Afghanistan so easily. So, well, actually, it's failure. I think probably it's very obvious the way the Americans have fought that war in Afghanistan. That has from the very beginning and from the outset, it was very clear that they could not have won this war. And in fact, actually, one thing I would say that Pakistan has been very consistent in one thing, and emphasizing that the war cannot actually bring peace in Afghanistan, and there should be some negotiated settlement. That was actually has been, and Americans, they're stuck in this war for 20 years, and without any clear strategy. They did not have actually, like I remember when. I think Henry Kissinger came to Woodrow Wilson at one point, and he was very profound on that when Americans go into war, they don't have any actually strategy, and soon after they try to find an exit strategy, and that has never happened. I think probably one can go into the history, but I don't think that it's time enough. But look, actually, when Obama administration increased the American forces in Afghanistan, and it went up to 140,000 at one point. And but very interestingly, that at that particular time, he also gave a kind of deadline for the campaign to end. So 18 months, and that was a famous story about Taliban, that they said, look, actually, you may have the watch, but we have the time. And exactly same thing happened. So, but again, actually, what was most shocking was the way the Kabul government or Kabul forces collapsed. We may actually now, in the hindsight, could see that it was inevitable. Inevitable in that sense that, number one, the Afghan forces were created. They were not there after 2010, by Americans. And there was no coherence as such. And then the other thing is that Afghan forces were trained as an extension of American army. And as soon as the Americans announced withdrawal, and also not American forces or troops, but also the contractors, and the entire Afghan army was dependent on the contractors. So basically, I think the way they collapsed, now we can understand why did it happen. But more importantly, what was happening actually, that initially when Taliban came back to power, many believed that Taliban O02 would be different from O01. And actually I think probably many countries also believe that. And initially it seemed that they may have moderated a little bit, because in the beginning they allowed women to work. They allowed actually the TV station to function. But soon actually they have returned to their original position. Now what we are witnessing is that the Taliban one is back. Well, what is going to happen in Afghanistan is also actually that there is an international dilemma for international community as well as for Pakistan, is how to deal with Taliban government at this time. You know, Taliban may have taken control, but it is a different situation than what it was in 1990s when Taliban came to power first time. They could not actually have complete control over entire Afghanistan. Even at the best of time, they had about 15% of Afghan territory was being controlled by Northern Alliance, and that was recognized by the international community. But now they may have the complete control over the territory. There's no organized resistance. But now actually what I believe, that resistance is developing. Afghanistan is different in many sense. Well, actually we have at least something happened in Afghanistan last 20 years. One has to recognize that it is no more the same Afghanistan. There's a new generation which has come, educated, and they have actually better awareness of the world. And they cannot take this actually forever. No, yes, actually there is no organized force, yes, but we have already seen the resistance coming, and it's sporadic, but it cannot last long actually, this Afghan situation.
Shaheen, can I add something on India? You see, in the life of nations, the missed opportunities at the state level, they are like a sin. And these opportunities then, at a later stage, they haunt and they return with a greater vengeance. What is the missed opportunities? In the context of South Asia, why it is so disconnected, why it is so impoverished as compared to all other regions of the world, South Asia has become a basket case. And this is hostage to one factor, and that is Pakistan-India rivalry. And somehow they are not willing or ready to reconcile. But within that, there were opportunities, and we both missed. I want to refer to two. One is Vajpayee's bus diplomacy, which Pakistan missed. And to quote General Durrani and A.S. Dulat's book, Spy Chronicles, at one stage, General Durrani asked Mr. Dulat that, Dulat Sahab, wasn't Vajpayee resisted or faced resistance by the security establishment or your foreign office establishment or the BJP establishment when he was taking this initiative? Dulat's reply was, General Sahab, Vajpayee himself was establishment. So he could overrule BJP establishment, he could overrule security establishment, and he could overrule foreign office establishment. At the same time, I also believe that India vis-a-vis BJP also lost an opportunity in Musharraf's Agra initiative. With the army on board here and the BJP dealing with Musharraf, Had there been some solution or formula or a way forward, I think things would have improved despite all the hiccups and resistance. So the present situation in the context of India-Pakistan is a state that is at war with itself. Who would talk to that state? Who would listen to that state? So therefore, the first and foremost is to put this house in order. If the opposition is at war with the government is at war with the opposition, and there is an internal strife, there is an internal security situation, there is a terrorism, there is a civil-military divide, undermining each other. In a state like this, who would listen to you? Who would like to have a dialogue with you? So therefore, I think this is a case of missed opportunities, one. But nevertheless, I mean, now the dialogue is the only way where we can break through. And the dialogue may not necessarily be between the two state apparatus. There are organizations, Zahid and myself have been part of Pak India Track 2. And we have been making our points, we have been making our friends, and they have carried those points to their establishment.
But
to
General,
their state. Yes.
you need, sorry for the interruption,
Please.
but you need the will to do it, right, on both sides, to sit on a peace table.
I take your point. The fact is, dialogue is at present is a need of our country, our people. And what I am suggesting in this is, the way forward is not only the state apparatus, because listen, I have been part of establishment. If you leave it to the establishment, security establishment, there will be no move forward. It will be like taking one step forward, two steps backwards. This is how the states deal. There has to be an initiative on part of like Track 2, like media, like business and trade organizations, like academia, and they can interact and they can create their space within, Indian society, etc. So that builds a pressure on the government, state authorities, that they must look into what the people are saying. So this is the requirement of time, that dialogue is a need of Pakistan. Even if India is refusing, we can involve external actors in this also, like US, like European Union. They have been making efforts. We all know Thomas Anderson was over-involved, so proactive, British High Commissioner here, in bringing India and Pakistan together. But unfortunately, as I said, when you allow a veto power, an overruling of like say trade relations, business and trade relations. No, this is economy. A security official is not allowed to veto this initiative. On what grounds a security organization is vetoing a trade policy or a business trade relations of two countries? This is what has been sad history of our relations with India.
Okay, but that General, I'll put another question to you, General Athar Abbas. Right now, we saw in Afghanistan or around the world, wherever, sometime we saw in during the cricket matches, when the Afghan team is losing, they're going to beat the other Pakistani. The fight starts, whatever you want to call them. Whereas when Afghan team is defeated by, in cricket, defeated by India, they're okay. So do you think this hatred is now inborn? And why is there a hatred? And what are the challenges now for Pakistan and Afghanistan?
Well, I think for a very long time there have been very strong perceptions built on both sides in Afghanistan as well as in Pakistan, which had really insulated the public. And for a long time, Afghan center has been dominated by the Northern Alliance people. And as you know, they had very good relations with India also. And one of the fear of Pakistan, which had really driven the security apparatus in Pakistan, was that India is creating a space in Afghanistan. And therefore, our vulnerabilities of Balochistan and KP and Gwadar and beyond, even till Karachi, Indians will have a penetration. And we had this very valid reasons also, because you remember Indian Raw Chief declaring that overt wars are out. He's on record saying that, and that has been endorsed by Partha Sarthi and J. Singh on television also. That now the time of overt war is over with Pakistan. We will now go for covert operations, striking the fault lines of Pakistan. And that has been happening. And somehow they have found a place like Afghanistan to operate from there. This is a God-given opportunity to them. Unfortunately, instead of, creating a situation where you address and narrow or reduce these fault lines, we have been reactive and blaming all around that, look, this is what is happening and this is what India is doing and this is why we are against Afghans and Afghan government and reacting against Afghans, etc. At the same time, I think this has been left out, how to address the Baloch grievances, how to address the political infighting, etc., how to address the situation of KP border. So this has created an environment where India has found a number of fault lines in Pakistan, and therefore we have come to a stage where it looks like a complete chaos.
Do you think people in Pakistan who are responsible for it are aware of their weaknesses?
It's not people only.
I know. I'm talking about establishment. Is establishment aware of its weaknesses? Establishment
aware of what weaknesses? That
all,
they,
you see, they
have a very straitjacket thinking process. Like when you decide on the policies, unfortunately, people have very less to say in those big policy matters, because we all understand the kind of a structure that we have created. The people's representative are virtually out of certain policy matters.
Zahid, you want to add something?
To greater extent, what is happening, or the feeling or sentiments of Afghans towards Pakistan, is basically because of our own policy. Not now, but for last 40 years for Afghanistan. I'm not saying that there was nothing from Afghanistan, but look actually what happened. We actually, we all know actually the famous thesis of General Aslam Beg, that he thought actually Afghanistan will provide the strategic depth to Pakistan. And I think that was the biggest mistake to understand. And I think probably, and then actually we have also had the great generals like Hamid Gul, who once actually suggested that Afghanistan should become the 5th province of Pakistan. So in a way, actually, the whole approach, Pakistan's establishment approach, Pakistan's government, because establishment is the government, is the state in Pakistan. There's no doubt about that. I mean, there's no question that whether you should leave the decision making to the establishment or not. Establishment does make a decision, and what we have seen in 1999 actually, when this initiative started with India, and so it could never be successful. So exactly same thing in Afghanistan. I have been covering Afghanistan. I started covering Afghanistan since 1991, when Najibullah went in power. So I could see actually the sentiments of Afghans, and it was not because of reason. We may have actually their own strategic consideration for whatever policy we are applying, but one question we could never give answer to Afghan people, that would you like a Taliban-like government in Pakistan? But you actually, Pakistan did support the Taliban, and not only now actually, but even earlier, and with the hope that it will give Pakistan some kind of a space there. But now it obviously is coming back to haunt us, but basically that is Afghan educated people I have never actually found any Afghan in Afghanistan who would actually support, despite the fact that Pakistan has supposed to have given a lot of support during anti-Soviet war. But the sentiment is so anti-Pakistan, and I can understand it. I can understand it, what we are trying to impose in Pakistan, or allowing or basically supporting a system which you would not like actually in Pakistan. So that is one of the major things. And I think probably even at the end, even at the, this one, even actually like when Taliban took over, I think there was some kind of skepticism, there was some kind of apprehension in the establishment too. But generally there was feeling, okay, the things will improve in Afghanistan, which is not going to happen.
Michael, you want to add something, or shall I put a question to you then?
Just very quickly to add to what Zahid have to say, looking at trying to gauge why this mistrust and unhappiness harbored by Afghans towards Pakistan, I'd go further than the point you made about strategic debt and what that entailed for Pakistan's support for Afghan militants, but I would also add other issues like refugee issues. And I know that it's important to note that Pakistan has generously hosted many Afghan refugees for many years, but in Afghanistan, many Afghans think about it in a different way. They know about the discrimination that many Afghan refugees have faced here, particularly Pashtuns. That's a huge factor, I think, in the mistrust issue. And also, the border. It's important to remember that every Afghan government, including the Taliban regime, I wouldn't describe it as a government, every political leadership, every government in Afghanistan since Pakistan's independence has rejected the border. And it may be an internationally recognized border on many contexts, but many Afghans, including governments, don't accept the border. So I think this plays into the issue as well. So it's a very complex thing, trying to gauge this mistrust. But not to take away from the very real successes and people-to-people relations and the trade and all of that. I think it's not a completely hostile relationship for sure, but I think it's important to highlight a variety of policy issues and realities that drive this mistrust and unhappiness in Afghanistan vis-a-vis Pakistan.
Michael, what is the United States interest in the region right now?
U.S. interest in the region? I mean, it's the evergreen U.S. interest in the region is stability, which I know is very vague and so on. But that's basically the interest. The U.S. wants to see the region not being at war. It doesn't want to see internal wars. It certainly wants to see better relations between India and Pakistan. That is clearly a priority. And it's an interesting thing because, particularly as the U.S. relationship with India has grown stronger, I think that Washington has been hesitant in not wanting to proactively or preemptively throw itself into the India-Pakistan dispute and volunteer itself as a mediator, because India doesn't want that. Thank you. But I think that what we've seen is when there's a crisis, Balakot, Pulwama, that crisis, and this has been in the case when there's an escalation in tensions between the two, when there's a crisis, and certainly when there have been wars, the U.S. has stepped in fairly quickly to try to de-escalate. It's not only the U.S. that's been doing that of late, it's also been the likes of China and some of the Gulf states. So the U.S. has a clear interest in a workable, not a perfect India-Pakistan relationship, that's unrealistic, but a workable India-Pakistan relationship. I would also argue, going back to what I said before, is that I think the U.S. would prefer to see a region in which China is not the only dominant external actor, so to speak. I've been having this conversation a lot during my time in Karachi over the last few days. The U.S. doesn't want to the U.S. does not want to contain China. It doesn't want to pin it down, but it does want to counter it. And it wants to take steps to ensure that countries in South Asia that are increasingly dealing commercially with China, that they don't do that quite as much. And that's why you're seeing stepped up efforts by the U.S. government to look into infrastructure investments in South Asia on the whole. So, I'll end there.
A quick remark on what Michael has said. The security experts here in Pakistan believe that yes, US doesn't want to see China as the only dominant power in the region. US does want stability within the region, but at the level of Pakistan, it wants to see a controlled chaos. This is how our security experts believe what the US policy is.
You want to reply? Okay. Mike.
Hello. Yeah, I think there's a lot of talk. After end of one war and the recent geopolitical development has shifted entire U.S. attention to contain China. There's no doubt about that. But basically, what they really want is not actually military way, but certainly the main focus on trade and an area of influence. But what I think actually for Pakistan, I think we are unnecessary and concern about that. Okay, India is a tilt towards India. So it's also sometimes I feel it's a kind of jilted lover syndrome which we have, and it should not be in the foreign policy. It should not be. There is the interest of the country which actually pave the way for your policy. I think I don't see any Pakistan coming into this American strategy to contain China. It's much more to do with the Indo-Pacific region.
So just to very briefly respond to that comment about controlled chaos. Certainly I recognize that I'm sure there are quite a few in Pakistan that think that the U.S. doesn't want controlled chaos; it wants uncontrolled chaos. No, look, this is not true. And if you consider that, historically, what U.S. concerns have been about South Asia, and particularly Pakistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, a lot of concern about Pakistan's nuclear weapons. This is not. I'd said this earlier. My sense is that U.S. concerns about Pakistan's nuclear safety issues have reduced. There's not as much concern about that. But if you're talking about a country that has long been concerned about the presence of nuclear weapons in Pakistan and concerns about volatilities in Pakistan and how that could impact nuclear safety, well, if you have controlled chaos, then you're not too far away from uncontrolled chaos, which would obviously raise implications for nuclear weapons. So I acknowledge that that's a perspective from some here, but in my view, it's not based in truth, the idea that the U.S. is looking for controlled chaos. I forgot the other thing I was going to say. Okay, please.
Thank you. I think we still have 12 minutes and I'll take audience views before I ask further questions. Is that okay, Mike? You want to add something?
No, yeah.
Yes.
Fantastic discussion, excellent discourse. My first compliment goes to General Saab with this thought, this thinking. You made it so far. Hats off to you. And I wish there are more officers like you in my army. I'll be very proud of it. Then, now the question, you mentioned about missed opportunities. There's a track record of missed opportunities, not just with India, with Iran, with Afghanistan, and even China. So let us not forget, we've got a track record. Now I'll come to Afghanistan, and my question relates to that. Missed opportunities started way back in 50s, late 50s, after Ayub Khan took over. During Skandar Mirza's time, and he was the president, there were talks between the top level with Zahid Shah, and Sardar Dawood was, I believe, the prime minister at the time.
Can you make question a little brief?
Yeah, and there was even a talk of confederation. I mean, that was the level of trust. Come Ayub Khan, and it all is, filed and forgotten, So these missed opportunities are there, and we never learn from them. Afghanistan has got, if they have grievances, they've got genuine reasons, and you just mentioned. 3 wars we have fought with India, our western border was secure. Thank you, Afghanistan, for that. And we must appreciate, because we have to understand their sensibilities.
Is it a statement or you want a question?
The question is, why can't we learn from history? The solution lies in history of the missed opportunities.
And you are
Thank you.
addressing to General?
General Saab and anyone else
General.
wants to answer.
You agree with that? Okay, Mike, you want to answer? Okay.
Yes.
I agree.
I think yes, actually we have done many mistakes. I think you are right, actually we should learn from history, not keep repeating the history, what happened. Now we have to move forward, And I think probably a lesson of Afghanistan is very, very pertinent at this point of time. And you are absolutely right, actually, like what I'm not saying that this is only Pakistan's mistake, but the way our foreign policy or so-called security policy has been run in this country, that has largely been responsible for our relations with not only Afghanistan but with other countries too. So the major problem is that Pakistan, instead of it has become a national security state, unfortunately. So when actually we have come out of this mindset, that if we actually feel like everybody is conspiring against us, then actually we can have a better relations with our neighbors.
Generally, in the context, this answer you may find in the book by Little Hart, Why Don't We Learn from History?
Yes, my question to all three of you is, we do reflect, all of you have reflected our missed opportunities and our establishment's wrong decisions. But my contention, and I was personally mentioning it to General Saab a few days earlier, what has been, continues to be, India's big insecurity vis-a-vis Pakistan. मैं उर्दू में कहूँगी, पागल से हो जाते हैं वो लोग, even if it comes down to cinema or art and culture. If we take a little center stage internationally vis-a-vis them, they go berserk, they go crazy. Is it only of late? Always. I have lived internationally even as an expat. Indians always were so insecure. I used to tell them repeatedly, you're 5 times bigger, your economy is bigger, you're more educated, you are popular. So we sell ourselves very short. I think Pakistan has much less in this chaos with India than India itself. I'm talking about people to people, friendship and stability. Indians are insecure. Why?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I actually think that India does not have insecurities about Pakistan, quite frankly. Yes, it's been concerned about terrorism risks. I mean, that's the facts. Terrorism threats, terrorism attacks in India that originate here, and in some cases have been sponsored by those in power. But I think these days, quite frankly, India's big insecurity is about China. I think that's very clear, especially as the border tensions have gotten worse. But India knows, the government knows, but given the type of government it is, it's never going to admit this. India cannot deter China on its border. That's very clear. And I think one reason why India concluded that recent truce with, that LOC truce with Pakistan, was so that it wouldn't have to worry about border issues with Pakistan, so that it could focus more fully on its border with China. But that gets to the question of, why does India respond in these ways? Why does it act insecure? I think a lot of it is performative, quite frankly. I think politically it certainly pays off for India and for the big, loud media networks that are oftentimes aligned with the BJP government. It serves them politically to take these positions. But I think aside from these lingering concerns about terrorism risks in Pakistan, India doesn't feel insecurities about Pakistan for the reasons you mentioned. It's so much bigger and so on. So I think one needs to distinguish genuine strategic sense of insecurity versus more politically based rhetoric and so on and so forth.
General, you want to add something?
One thing actually that's about, I would not say it's insecurity. Yes, certainly actually the sentiments in India about what you just said actually about that anything from Pakistan is basically rejected, or some of the actions which have taken. It's something to do with the new Hindutva, the government. And one should recognize actually what are the sentiments in India has changed completely over the years. Not only actually about Pakistan, but India's own secular culture has under threat. So it is, I think whatever is happening now actually it's a part of the BJP ideology.
General Athar, you want to ask?
Once Henry Kissinger made a remark, it is quite understandable when a country like Pakistan feels insecurity against such a big neighbor. But it is uncomprehendable that a country with the size of India feels so insecure with a state as small as Pakistan. So this was his remark. Second, I think India feels that too much security of this neighbor, it feels that it is their insecurity. And I think, last, that in history, when we see, India has always been subjected to invasion from the northwest. The 6 invaders, rulers, who came from Afghanistan and went up till New Delhi, and of course the invasion of Muslims from south, it was against India. This is somehow in their psyche. I don't say this is overriding, but this is in the psyche of Indian public, Indian security analysts, Indian security establishment also. And therefore what we see is that 2/3 of Indian defense deployment is on the border of Pakistan. It is not on the border of China or not on the border of Bangladesh. It is on the border of Pakistan.
जी जनरल साहब ने एक गुफ्तगू की तहरीक तालिबान से मुज़ाकरात के बारे में। तो मुज़ाकरात के हवाले से चूँकि जो जरगा किया था, मैंने उसके कई अरकान को इंटरव्यू किया। एक तो हमारी तैयारी बड़ी नाक़िस थी। दूसरी गुजारिश ये है कि जब जरगा जाता है पश्तून समाज में, उसको बाकायदा एक इख्तियार दिया जाता है और वो नेगोशिएशंस, उसकी एक पावर होती है और वो जाके लोगों को कन्विंस करता है। जबकि जरगे के पीछे जब हमारे कोर कमांडर्स और मिलिट्री इस्टेब्लिशमेंट के लोग बैठेंगे तो फिर वो लॉजिस्टिक्स का भी मुतालिबा करेंगे, वो अपने रोड्स की भी, अपनी सिक्योरिटी की भी, और जो ज़मीनी हक़ाइक़ है उससे ज़्यादा मुतालिबात करेंगे। और ये गुज़िश्ता जरगे के साथ हुआ। दूसरी ज़ाहिद हुसैन साहब से गुजारिश है कि एक सवाल है कि उन्होंने कहा कि तालिबान के पहले और दूसरी में फ़र्क के हवाले से, तो अफ़गान तालिबान के जो हवाले से मैं समझता हूँ कि वो डिप्लोमेटिक रिलेशंस पे यकीन रखते हैं, रास्ते बनाते हैं, चाइना के साथ रिलेशन रखते हैं और मुल्कों के साथ उनका सिलसिला है। इसके अलावा बहुत सारे ट्रीटीज़ भी करने जा रहे हैं,
थोड़ा मुख्तसर कर
लेकिन उसमें उनके साथ मेरे ख्याल से मसला ये हो गया जो उनकी तकसीम है हालिया ख़वातीन की तालीम के हवाले से, या सिराज अक़ानी का जो करंट स्टेटमेंट है कि उनसे भी, उनके अंदर भी एक इंतहा पसंद ग्रुप या एक तंदज़ा ग्रुप ख़ानदार वो सारा पावर लेके गया है, और शायद ये कन्फ्यूजन क्या उसकी वजह से है या इसकी कोई और भी वजह है।
आई थिंक आपने जो दो चीज़ें मैंने, आई डिडंट से कि दैट देयर इज अ डिफरेंस बिटवीन तालिबान 1 and 2 नाउ। इट इज़ ऑलमोस्ट एक्चुअली कल्चरली दे हैव गॉन बैक टू दिस। इनिशियली इट सीम्ड दैट दे विल बी स्लाइटली डिफरेंट। इट हैज़ नॉट हैपेंड। The second thing, yes, actually Taliban have become much more pragmatic. There is no doubt about that. The situation is different. They are trying to establish relations with other countries. But if you see, actually, initially, almost all the countries wanted to have some kind of relations with Taliban. It was a different situation when it was 1919, when the Taliban government was completely isolated. But this time it was not. But basically, after a year, actually, everyone is thinking about that actually whether they can formally recognize. And I think probably even Pakistan, which had recognized actually earlier government, they would not actually recognize the government. The other problem, which is basically concerns the international community, is that yes, actually Taliban may be fighting Daesh because of they feel threatened by them, but there are still actually militant groups operating from Pakistan. This is not just about TTP, like IMU, like ETM, which is basically China. They have not taken any action against them, and that is one of the reasons why there has not been any move forward in the relationship with China. It's not just Pakistan. They have advised Pakistan to negotiate with Taliban, TTP, and I think probably Pakistan was wrong initially by accepting this dialogue. They should not have. They should have been very clear, and I think probably that has been the tragedy of our policy, that we keep repeating the same mistake. But as far as China is concerned, China is also very concerned about ETM's presence in Afghanistan, and I think probably it's a universal concern.
Zahid sir, before I take another question, whose fault it is we keep on repeating the mistakes?
Yes.
You said why?
But,
Whose fault?
we look actually whose fault we cannot actually, we know actually who makes policy. I mean, like everybody knows, actually, this Afghan policy, Indian policy is made by the establishment. So I don't need to actually tell the people. We all know, actually, even every politician, every person in this country know about that, when it comes to Afghanistan, even actually now civilian government, whenever they have power, they are also resigned to the fact that, okay, this is the domain of the security agency, so let them deal with that. And then exactly same thing happened when they started negotiating with the TTP. And I think probably this time they have a good ally in Imran Khan.
Assalamu alaikum. One of the security issues in South Asia is the internationally recognized Kashmir dispute. It is an active UN agenda, and it seems difficult that it will reach to a peaceful settlement without active engagement of big powers. Not only the government, but civil society and think tanks. So, Mr. Michael, what is your take on this? Thank you.
Thank you. Interesting the question was directed to me. Thank you. Honestly, I don't think there's much hope at all for any type of resolution, much less forward movement on dialogue on the Kashmir issue. The political environment is not right for that in India. In terms of the international community, well, I think it's quite clear that much of the world, if not most of the world, most countries in the world, are perfectly content to acknowledge India's position that there should not be any external involvement, right? I mean, and this is not, I'm just not just talking about the West, I'm not just talking about the US, not just talking about EU countries, the Gulf states, the OIC countries, they haven't really been interested in getting involved. And, of course, as you remember, some time ago when the Khan government was still in power, there was actually a spat with the Saudis, a key ally because of the view of the Pakistani government that the Saudis weren't taking a strong enough position on Kashmir in alignment with Pakistan. So that's quite telling in of itself. I do think that the rights situation is concerning for many governments around the world, and certainly the US government has brought attention to rights concerns in Kashmir, but in terms of the territorial dimensions of the issue, that's where there's no interest in all, and no interest at all in getting involved. And I said this earlier today, I don't mean to be overly provocative, though I guess we've already been a bit provocative. It may be time to consider the question in Pakistan, is it possible to move beyond Kashmir, particularly when it comes to relations with India? Given that there's very little hope, there seems to be very little hope for any type of forward movements. Again, given the political realities in India, the BJP is not going anywhere. It's going to be there for many years. Modi will be back, and after he goes, I imagine one of his acolytes, I think we know who those could become the next prime minister. I don't see things changing. So that suggests that maybe it's time to think about, no, I don't want to endorse this position. I pose the question, is it time to think about accepting the status quo and trying to move on and trying to pursue better relations with India beyond that? I think it's a question that will be considered a lot in the coming years.
Can I add something? What's the name of this young woman who asked the question? Okay. Every American president virtually had promised before coming to election, before coming into power and after coming into power, that they will do something about Kashmir. They will bring India and Pakistan for a dialogue on Kashmir. Zero effort by all the presidents. Second, Zahid and myself, we were in New Delhi a few years back, and there was a seminar in which a Kashmiri journalist was also invited. And he said, and let me narrate this in Urdu, मेरे 22 क्लासमेट्स या तो मारे गए हैं या गायब हैं आज तक. And this was 2014, right, when we were there. And second, he said, हमारे और हिंदुस्तान के दरमियान 1,00,000 कब्रों की दीवार खड़ी है, ये कोई नहीं गिरा सकता. This is, so wait for the time. This is not a time. Maybe we are on the wrong side of history at this time, but the time will come, inshallah.
Thank you very much. We are running short of time. Thank you very much, audience. A lovely question.